Okay, friends, so we are doing the uh, endocrine system. Just making a quick video here for you. So the endocrine system, what is the endocrine system? The endocrine system is our hormonal system. So this is going to be all about communication. So we have two ways to communicate inside of our body. We've already learned about the nervous system. Our brain is in charge of everything. Sensory information comes in, body's got to decide. It's hot. What do we do? Let's start shivering. It's got to make an effect. Oh, a lion is trying to eat me. Oh my goodness, that sensory input comes in from our eyes. It goes into our brain. Our brain's got to make a decision. It's got to integrate that information. What's it going to do? Oh, I got to speed up my heart rate and speed up my breath, and I got to get blood to my big muscles so that I can run away. That's one way of communicating is through electrical wires. That is the nervous system. There's another way for the body to communicate. You got to think of the body as a bit like a symphony. So there is going to be the piano, there's going to be the violins, the oboes, the cellos. They all have their part to play to make this music sound great. But if every instrument was just playing what they wanted to play, it would sound terrible. So you have to have somebody that keeps everybody together, and that's the conductor. Now, the conductor here would be the brain, and the body parts all need to communicate with each other. And the way that we can do that is through hormones. So you can think of these molecules, they're basically just sending emails to each other about what's going on, and they tell people what to do sometimes. They tell people, hey, we need to do this, or this is like this. So that's essentially what this system is about. It's just a communication system. So we have several ways that we can do that. We know that we have gap junctions here that we learned about in our cardiovascular system. We have neurotransmitters. So a neuron is going to send an electrical signal. There's going to be an action potential that goes down it. And then as the action potential gets into the axon terminal, that is going to release neurotransmitters that are going to affect a target cell. So like when we learned about how muscle contraction happens, a nerve is going to release acetylcholine. That's a neurotransmitter. It's going to bind to the acetylcholine receptor. And then it's going to cause all of that stuff to happen so that we get a muscle contraction. We also have autocrine and paracrine. We're going to talk about these in a second. So essentially, this is where you can release signaling molecules to a neighbor. So think about like a neuron releasing its signaling molecules to stimulate a muscle, or an autocrine. So that's basically just going to stimulate what's closely around them. And then the autocrine, we're going to have cells that actually stimulate themselves with their own secretions. That sounds kind of weird. And then obviously we have hormones, which are like the communication molecules. Now, every system that you learn in this class, you should always know the different glands that we have, and you should be able to recognize them. The exams like to put pictures of these things on here, right? So we can start with things in the brain, like the pineal gland, the person that's in charge, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, thyroid, thymus, pancreas, adrenal gland, ovaries, and testes. So those are our endocrine glands. Now, we have other organs in our body that are also going to secrete hormones. Like our heart is going to secrete hormones. They have cells in there that are going to do that. Our stomach is going to secrete hormones. Our liver is going to secrete some. So we have our organs that we have that are part of the system, and then we have other organs that are kind of adjacent that have hormone secreting cells in them. So the first question that we ask is, what is the difference between endocrine and exocrine? You should know the difference between these. So you should actually know the difference between endocrine, exocrine, and paracrine. So what's the difference between endocrine and exocrine glands? Well, the answer that you should have memorized in your head is that exocrine glands have ducts. Well, what is a duct? Well, it's like duct tape. It's not duck, duct. So what is a duct? A duct is a tube like this, and it's going to release its product through that tube. So imagine this here is a sweat gland. So this gland is going to secrete sweat into it, and it's going to secrete it up through its duct onto the skin. Now, how is that different than an endocrine gland? Endocrine glands don't have ducts. They secrete things into the bloodstream. So for example, you have a thyroid gland. So it's on either side of your neck here like this. You have two thyroid glands that are going to be right in here. It looks like wings. They're going to secrete T3 and T4, our thyroid hormones. They don't go through ducts, and they go into the bloodstream because they are going to circulate throughout the body. Now, some other things. Exocrine glands are going to secrete something that is kind of already formed. So, for example, a sweat, it's already formed, it's going to do its job, like it's already doing something. An endocrine gland is, in contrast, is going to secrete something that is going to signal another cell to do something. So, for example, T3 is a thyroid hormone that basically is going to go to every single cell in the human body and be like, hey, do your job. Come on, brain cell, get to work. Come on, heart cell. Come on, liver cell. Come on, lung cell. It's going to bind to the receptor and it's going to tell that cell to do whatever it's supposed to do. Exocrine glands are usually going to be somewhere kind of local, what they do. They're going to secrete it. So, for example, you have something like your pancreas. Now, your pancreas is cool because it has both endocrine and exocrine functions. What are the endocrine functions? It's going to secrete hormones into the bloodstream. What does it secrete? Well, one of the important ones is insulin. Insulin. So that's its endocrine function. It's secreting a hormone, which endocrine glands do, into the bloodstream that's going to affect all the other cells in the body. What's the exocrine function of your pancreas? Well, you have your duodenum here, and your pancreas is going to secrete digestive enzymes to break down all those carbs, fats, and proteins that we have. So it has both functions. So you should know examples of your exocrine glands like sweat glands, sebaceous glands, ruminous glands. You should know endocrine glands, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. And then you should know examples of both, like one is your pancreas, two is your testes, or your ovaries. The testes, what's their exocrine function? They're going to secrete it through a duct, through the vas deferens. What are they secreting through there? Sperm. It's like this already formed thing that's going to go somewhere locally. What is the hormonal function through the exocrine? That's going to be testosterone. With the ovaries, what is the exocrine function? It's going to secrete it down a tube, right? Down a duct. What duct is that? Fallopian tube is a duct. It's going to secrete something locally. It's already done. It's not going to signal anything. What is the ovary do? Produces estrogen and all the female hormones. And that's going to go through the bloodstream, out to the body. So make sure that you can define endocrine and exocrine on your own. You could be able to explain all that stuff to somebody. A patient asks you, what's the difference between endocrine and exocrine? You'd be able to explain that. This is just discussing the difference between endocrine system and the nervous system and how they work. You should be able to compare and contrast them. We learned about modes of exocrine secretion in a previous chapter. Now remember, the exocrine glands can secrete different things, but they can do it kind of differently. You have an merocrine secretion. All merocrine means is that when this cell is making something, it needs to get it outside. This cell is making something, it needs to get it outside of the cell. The apocrine is secreting something, but it needs to get it out. How does it get it out, though? There are three different ways that you can get it out of the cell. One, you can make a vesicle, and you can secrete it in a little bubble, like that. And those vesicles are going to release whatever product that is out into wherever that's going. Apocrine just pinches off the top of the fatty membrane, and then it goes off as a fat bubble, and it floats around like that. So this would be something like breast milk. You're making the casein protein inside the cell, and then the fat bubble breaks off, and then that goes to become breast milk. Holocrine, it's like, you know what? I'm not going to make a vesicle. I'm not going to break off the top. I'm just going to disintegrate this. So it makes the package of whatever it's trying to get, and then this thing just disintegrates, and it actually becomes the product. So in this case, this would be something like your sebaceous glands. So inside your skin, you've got those sebaceous glands, and they're constantly replicating these cells, and eventually that cell just starts disintegrating, and then that becomes the stuff that kind of moisturizes your skin. It's like dead sebaceous gland cell, right? So they linked a video here if you want to watch the YouTube. This is a crash course. I like these videos. I think they're cute. All right. So now autocrine versus paracrine. So let's give you an example here. So you have these big cells in your body. They're called macrophages, right? They're called macrophages. And they're big fat cells. And all they really like to do is they stand at kind of the entrances. I would think of them as bouncers. And somebody's trying to get into your club, your body, and say a bad guy wants to try to get in. He's a bad guy here. What can happen is that you get these big giant cells that are called macrophages, which are cell-eating cells. And this bad guy's trying to get in, and the bouncer goes and he eats him up like this. He makes the pseudopods and he goes, psh. And then what happens is he's going to use a lysosome and digest this bad guy. Now he's like, ooh, I got a bad guy in me. I got to alert the rest of the immune system that a bad guy is trying to get in. So it will send out some chemokines, which are just molecules that are going to go out, and they're going to signal the immune system. They're going to say, hey, APB, we got some bad guys trying to get in. Let's alert the immune system. But at the same time, what it does is there's going to be a receptor that sits on the outside of the cell that it's going to bind to. That same signal that it's releasing, it's going to bind to it, and it's going to make it more alert. It's going to pump it up. It's like it pumps itself up, and it stimulates itself to make it more alert for bad guys. So what is an autocrine? The cell is going to release something that is going to stimulate itself. That is the target cell. Paracrine is when the cell is going to release something that's going to stimulate cells around it. So an example of this would be something like histamine. So you guys know what histamine is. You've taken maybe an antihistamine drug. Usually has to do with allergies. So what happens is you get, like, say, an allergen in your eye, like a piece of dust. What happens is you have mast cells that are going to respond to that. They're in your immune system, and they're going to release histamine. And now what's histamine going to do? It's going to start affecting all the cells around it. So maybe it hits a blood vessel. And what does that do? It's going to cause vasodilation of the blood vessels. And then what's going to happen is you're going to see all of the vessels in your eyes dilated, and your eyes are going to look red, and they're going to start weeping. And you're going to get some tearing. That's paracrine. So let's go back. What is the difference between endocrine, exocrine, paracrine, and autocrine? Close your laptop, take a piece of paper, write it out. Exocrine, through ducts, it secretes something that's formed. It's usually locally. Endocrine, it secretes hormones into the bloodstream. Usually goes throughout the body. Autocrine, the cell secretes a molecule that is going to stimulate the cell that secreted it, self-stimulation. The paracrine is going to release a chemical that is going to stimulate the cells that are surrounding it. That gland, that paracrine gland, or that paracrine cell. So make sure that you can do those 4 things. Okay. Hopefully I'm recording that. Okay, good, I recorded it. My worst nightmare is to, like, do something and then to not record it. I've done that so many times. All right, so for the rest of this chapter, there's a lot to learn. You should know all of the hormones that come from your hypothalamus. You should know what their functions are. You should know what all the hormones are for the pituitary, and you should know what those are and what those do. You should know all of the hormones that are secreted by the different glands that you have in your body, and you should know what. So for each of these, you should know the hormone, you should know the target cell, and you should know the stimulus for it, and you should know how it's regulated. That is a lot of stuff, but it's all very similar. So once you get one, you kind of get all the rest. So we just kind of need to discuss this relationship between the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So the hypothalamus, I guess we could do this right here. Oh no, that's not what I need. Insert. Okay. So you can draw this out here. Let's draw this. Draw 3 circles. So this is kind of the hierarchy that you can imagine at a job. So if you work at a hospital, this is admin. This is administration. This is a manager. And you could relate this to basically any job. And these are the workers. These are the nurses right here. This is going to be represented by the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is basically admin. They're in charge of everything. Admin, what does admin do? They don't work on the floor. They don't ever go out. They don't do sales. They don't do service. What do? They sit in their big offices. They have meetings and they discuss what's going on with the company. They get numbers in. They're like, oh, our thyroid is low this month. Some of our testosterone has gone too high. We are getting dehydrated. Our body temperature is dysregulated. Like they just get information in. They get information about what's going on inside the body, and then they have a meeting to decide what to do about it. That's what your hypothalamus does. Remember, the hypothalamus is the 4 F's. It's in charge of those things. So make sure that you can tell me the functions of the hypothalamus. The manager is going to be the pituitary. That is the pituitary. So the pituitary probably was a worker at one point, but now has moved up to management. So what's going to happen is the hypothalamus and the pituitary are going to talk to each other. The workers are going to be the different organs or the different. I added it. I don't need that on my Christmas list. The organs are going to be the workers. So this will be your glands. This will be your thyroid gland. Will be here. You can have your I was about to draw some testes, but we don't need to do that. This would be your testes or your ovaries are the workers. This would be like a mammary gland. Like a mammary gland would be your your muscles and bones would be some of the organs. Okay? And all of these guys are going to do their job. They do their job. So what does the thyroid do? Oh, we also have the adrenal gland. So we'll have like the mammary gland, adrenal gland, thyroid gland, ovaries, testes, muscles, bones. I think I got all of them. So what does the thyroid gland do? What's its job? It's going to secrete thyroid hormone, T3 and T4. T3 is the active, T4 is the inactive, T3 and T4. What do the testes do? The testes secrete sperm as its exocrine function. And what else do? They make testosterone. What do the ovaries do? They make eggs. They do stuff like progesterone and estrogen. What do the mammary glands do? They make breast milk. What do the adrenal glands do? They do lots of stuff. You should know all your adrenal gland hormones. There's a bunch of them. Because there's 2 parts to the adrenal gland. There's going to be a cortex that's on the outside, and there's going to be a medulla that's on the inside. The medulla that's on the inside is epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline, adrenal gland. That works as kind of your sympathetic area. The cortex secretes a lot of different hormones, but the one that we're worried about right now is going to be cortisol. And then what do our bones? These are going to, and muscles and liver. Actually, mainly your liver here is going to secrete this stuff called IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor 1. All right, so all of these organs and all of these workers that are hired by the hospital or whatever job you're in, that's their job. How do they know how to do their job? They don't get to decide anything. They have to be told by somebody to do their job. So your thyroid's just sitting around being like, we made all this thyroid. Should we release it or not? We got to wait for a signal from somebody. So who usually tells everyone what to do? The manager. So the manager is going to tell the adrenal gland to release cortisol. The manager is going to tell the thyroid to release pituitary. The manager is going to tell the testes to release sperm and testosterone. The ovaries are going to be told by the manager. The mammary gland is going to get told by the manager. The liver is going to be told by the manager. But how does the manager know what to do? Who tells the manager what to do? The admin tells them what to do. So who's that? That's the hypothalamus. Now, does the hypothalamus go down and talk to the workers? No, they're not leaving their offices all the way up there. They're going to stay up there and they're going to have meetings and read about numbers, and they haven't worked on the floor, and they're going to go and they're going to complain to the manager. Hey, your employees aren't working hard enough. Why is it blah, blah, blah? And you're going to be like, why don't they come down here and try to work and see how this is, right? So the way this will work is that hypothalamus, your hypothalamus will be sampling your blood. It will be getting numbers. So let's just write that in there. We don't write admin anymore. We can write hypothalamus. The CEOs, they're in charge. So here's the hypothalamus. So let's just say, for example, our thyroid hormone is too low. Our patient is feeling sluggish. Their hair is falling out. They're cold all the time. They can't recover from exercise. They have digestive issues. Outer third of their eyebrow is disappearing. T4 is low. All right, so T4 is low. Who produces T4? The thyroid. Maybe the thyroid isn't doing its job. So what does the hypothalamus do? It says, oh, guys, T4 is too low. What do we got to do? Are they going to go down and talk to the thyroid gland? Heck no. They're going to stay up in their office, and they are going to yell at the pituitary, and they're going to send a nasty email. Per my last email, I thought we talked about this already. Blah, So how do you communicate in the human body, in the endocrine system? You communicate by what? Hormones. So the hypothalamus is going to release a hypothalamic hormone that has to deal with the thyroid. And that is going to bind to the pituitary gland. And then the pituitary gland is being like, oh, I just got a message from the hypothalamus. I got a hypothalamic hormone. It bound to a receptor. It told me that I need to tell thyroid to make more thyroid glands. So what's it going to do? It's going to release a hormone that is going to try to stimulate the thyroid to produce T3 and T4. So let's fill it in now, okay? So we know the hypothalamus measures stuff. It gets all the sensory input about everything that's going on. It tells the pituitary, hey, pituitary, we don't have enough cortisol. We don't have enough thyroid. We don't have enough testosterone. We need more sperm. We need more milk. We need more, it's getting some sort of stimulus that's telling the body we need something. The hypothalamic hormones, there are going to be, oh, where are we? They are going to be called releasing or inhibiting hormones. So if you get confused in any of these things, if you see an I or an R in it, you generally are going to think of having a hypothalamic hormone. So the hypothalamus has its own hormones that it communicates with. So if you see an R, a releasing, a releasing, a releasing, a releasing, you know you're looking at a hypothalamic hormone. So we are trying to get the thyroid going, but we got to talk to the pituitary first. So what are we going to use? Thyrotropin releasing hormone. Don't get confused on it. So this hormone is going to be thyrotropin releasing hormone. That's going to tell the pituitary, yo, get the thyroid to release some hormone. And it's going to bind to the pituitary. And then what the pituitary is going to do, now the pituitary is divided into two parts. It's got an anterior and a posterior. There are 7 anterior hormones and 2 posterior hormones. So the thyroid releasing hormone is going to bind to the pituitary, and it's going to say, we need more thyroid stimulated, or we need more thyroid hormone. We need more T3 and T4. So what is the pituitary going to do? It's going to try to stimulate the thyroid to release its hormones. How's it going to do that? By a hormone. That's how it communicates. Thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. And then TSH is going to bind to the thyroid, and the thyroid's going to be like, hey, they're telling us we need to release more thyroid hormone. And then T4 is going to be produced, and T3. And that's going to go back up to the hypothalamus. And it's going to say the hypothalamus is going to be like, yay, it's all regulated. We're happy now. And it's going to turn that off, stop releasing thyrotropin releasing hormone, and stop releasing thyroid stimulating hormone. And then you're at euthyroid, where you're at a homeostatic level of the appropriate amount of thyroid. If that's confusing, it's okay. That is a very confusing topic. Let's do it one more time. So what are we doing? We're talking about the endocrine system. We have hormones in our body that are communicating with everything. For example, we talked about the thyroid gland for a second. What does the thyroid gland do? The thyroid gland, well, you want to know what the thyroid gland does? What happens when somebody has low thyroid? If you have hypothyroidism, what are the symptoms of that disease? Hypothyroidism, usually very tired, usually feel cold all the time, usually are going to have issues, with gaining weight or losing weight, usually has exercise intolerance. The outer third of the eyebrow might be off. What does that have to do with? That has to do with what? Metabolism, right? Your body's energy system. What the thyroid does is it secretes T3 and T4. Well, what do T3 and T4 do? Remember, hormones are signaling molecules that tell target cells what to do. Well, every single cell in your body has a receptor. Your brain cell, your heart cell, liver cell, lung cell, spleen cell, skin cell, hair cell, they all have receptors for thyroid hormone. So what does the thyroid hormone do? It is the hype man of the body. It goes around and says, hey, skin cell or hair cell, get to divide and do your job. It goes down into your intestinal cells. Intestinal cells, do what you need to do. Muscle cells, get going. Get your metabolism up. So if you don't have that, that makes sense, right? Of all the other symptoms that you get with low thyroid. So thyroid is pretty important. But what would happen? So with our hormones, we know this. We know about homeostasis. You don't want to have too low, but you also don't want to have too high. What happens when somebody has too high of thyroids? I can't talk. Too high of thyroid. Usually like pretty jacked up. Usually high energy. They could be very nervous. Sometimes they get sweaty. Usually very thin. They can be. They don't always have to be. Heart rate. They can get heart palpitations, right? Because the thyroid's going to the heart, and you're releasing too much. It's like, come on, heart, let's go, 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 go. Like, where do we go? And then the heart they start having heart palpitations. You can get growth of the periorbital fat behind the eye, and it causes the eyes to bulge out, and you get exothalamus. So we don't want that either, right? We want to be in this nice Goldilocks little range here, like right in between. That's called euthyroid. So how do we regulate all of this? Well, we regulate all of our hormones. You have a hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. Don't get confused. Thyroid produces T3 and T4. And it's a hierarchy. You have admin at top, hypothalamus. You have the pituitary as the manager. You have the thyroid as the worker. T4 comes up. This level is too low. That's going to get the hypothalamus into action. We're losing money. We need to do more procedures, right? Then you have this infundibulum in here. This is the thing that holds the pituitary and the hypothalamus together. There are blood vessels in here that's called the hypophyseal portal system that is going to transport, because right, these are hormones, they're going to transport down into the bloodstream to the pituitary. So we're trying to get thyroid, so that's going to be T, thyroid releasing hormone. If you have an R, you know it's hypothalamus. That's going to travel through the portal system until it stimulates the thyrotropes. These are cells in here that are going to produce what? We need to stimulate the thyroid to secrete T3 and T4. That is going to be thyroid stimulating hormone. That's going to bind to the receptors on the thyroid inside it, the cells in there, and those cells are going to be like, okay, yeah, you're stimulating me. I'm going to make more T3 and T4. The T3 or the T4 goes back up as a negative feedback loop, and it says, hey, all right, you have enough. I'll stop secreting releasing hormone. I'll stop secreting TSH. I'll stop secreting T3 and T4, and we are at our appropriate level, not too high, not too low. That's how all your hormones work, or that's how not all your hormones, majority of your hormones work. So let's do let's stick here for a second with the thyroid while we're on it. So let's see if we understand this correctly, right? If a patient comes to you and has all of those symptoms, they feel sluggish, they feel tired, I'm fatigued, my hair is falling out, I'm cold all the time, because the hypothalamus, remember, it regulates body temperature. So if you're not getting enough stimulus from the T4, your metabolism up, you're not going to be burning as much fuel and you're not going to be generating as much heat. You're going to be cold. You do some blood work. What should you suspect? So when you do blood work for thyroid, there's many labs you can do, but the basic one that you're looking at is T4 and TSH. So if you suspect that your patient is hypothyroidism, they've got low thyroid, what would you expect their T4 levels to be? Well, it is the definition of hypothyroidism. You would expect their T4 to be low, right? Because that's you're when you say you're having hypothyroidism, you're saying you have low thyroid. Does that make sense? Now, what would the TSH be in this case? Now, think about this for a second. You may want to say that it's low, but think about it for 1 second. Let's imagine in the scenario of our person that T4 is low. And in United States, you know what the number one condition for hypothyroidism? It's called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and it's an immune attack against the thyroid. And what it does is it burns out the follicles that produce thyroid hormones. So they actually are missing factories. They're missing the factories because the immune system is attacking the thyroid. And so they can't, their thyroid is just worn out. It's like, I can't produce anymore. Our factories are working overtime. We can't keep up with the body. So T4 is now low. So what's the hypothalamus going to do in response to low T4? It's going to secrete thyroid releasing hormone. What does thyroid releasing hormone do? It's going to stimulate the pituitary to secrete what? TSH. TSH is going to go to the thyroid. But if the thyroid doesn't have enough follicles, is it going to get stimulated? Is it going to secrete more T4? No. So T4 stays low. So what's going to happen? It's still low. Hypothalamus is like, what the heck? It's still low. I've been telling you to do your job. Secretes more thyroid releasing hormone. The pituitary secretes more TSH. No budging on T4. What the heck? More TRH. More TSH. So what's the level of TSH going to be when somebody has low thyroid? It's going to be high. Don't get TSH and T4 confused. A lot of students do that. Can a thyroid stimulate itself? No, it usually can't. So that's thyroid stimulating hormone is stimulating the thyroid. You know it's going to come from the pituitary. Sorry, I got an email. If you understood that, then you get the concept here. So let's do another one. Which one do you want to do? Let's do a testy here. Okay. So we have the hypothalamus, we have the pituitary, testes. So what does the testes produce? They do sperm and an egg. Or not sperm and an egg. Lord have mercy, I need to go eat something. They do sperm and testosterone. All right. So how do the testes know what to produce? Well, they don't decide on their own. The hypothalamus does. So the hypothalamus says our testosterone is too low. So what is it going to do? It's going to do what? It's going to secrete a hormone to tell the pituitary to get to work. So you know it's going to have an R in it, and probably an H because it's going to be releasing hormone. So you're going to have a gonadotropin releasing hormone, GN releasing hormone. That's going to bind to the pituitary. And now we're making testosterone. So what hormone are we going to make that's going to come from the pituitary? That's going to be luteinizing hormone. We'll go over these in a second. Luteinizing hormone. Now, luteinizing hormone goes down, it talks to the testy, and what's it going to do? It's going to tell it to secrete testosterone. Testosterone goes up, GRNH gets, boop, take that away, LH, boop, normalizing levels of testosterone. What about the sperm? Same thing, really. It's going to release gonadotropin releasing hormone. It's going to tell the pituitary, hey, we need to have more sperm produced by the testes. We're going to do follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone is going to bind to the testes. And that's going to make more sperm. Got enough sperm? We can stop this process. Let's do breast milk. You have a mammary gland. We need to make some breast milk. How does the pituitary do, or how does the mammary gland do that? It doesn't do it on its own. It starts in the hypothalamus. Now, this is a weird one. How is the pituitary going to stimulate the mammary gland? It's going to release a hormone called prolactin. Prolactation. And that's going to stimulate the mammary gland to secrete that. Well, now how does the pituitary know to release prolactin? Well, remember, the hypothalamus always tells it what to do. This is a weird one because what would you suspect the name would be of this hormone? Like, the naming convention that we've already done. You'd want a releasing hormone right here, right? So PRH. And so you'd assume that it would be prolactin releasing hormone, but in fact, it is not, which is kind of silly. They suspect that that exists, but they've never discovered it. So what actually stimulates it is thyrotropin releasing hormone. I know that sounds ridiculous, but yeah, thyrotropin releasing hormone stimulates the pituitary, which stimulates the pituitary to secrete prolactin. Prolactin then stimulates the mammary gland to make breast milk. All right, now let's go back here and talk about this. So we need to learn about the relationship between the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And what is that called? That is called the infundibulum. So you see this, let me make it bigger because I'm sure that's tiny on your screen. This thing right here, this little stalk that holds the hypothalamus, the pituitary, that is called the infundibulum. In there, you have your hypophyseal portal system. That's this. It's a set of blood vessels. They're capillaries that we're going to release hormones from the hypothalamus, and it's going to go down into the bloodstream here. And then it is going to stimulate cells in this area. That are going to release the pituitary hormones in response to the hypothalamic hormones. There's an anterior pituitary and there's a posterior pituitary. Now, what are the 7 pituitary hormones in the anterior pituitary? There is what is called ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. That's going to stimulate the adrenal cortex to secrete cortisol. It's going to secrete growth hormone, which is going to stimulate the liver to secrete IGF-1. Then that's going to stimulate growth in bone and muscle. It's going to be thyroid stimulating hormone. That's going to stimulate the thyroid to make T3 and T4. We're going to have follicle stimulating hormone, which is going to stimulate the ovaries and testes to make their gametes, the egg and the sperm. Prolactin is going to tell the breast milk to produce breast milk or secrete it. And then we have melanocyte stimulating hormone, which we don't have on here. And then you have luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is going to come out and it's going to tell the testes and ovaries to produce their hormones, testosterone and progesterone. The posterior pituitary is going to have two. It's got oxytocin and ADH. ADH is anti-diuretic hormone. What does a diuretic do? It makes you pee. What is anti-diuretic hormone? Makes you not pee. Why would you want to not pee? If you got dehydrated, if your blood pressure was low, your blood volume was low. Oxytocin, what does it do? Well, it stimulates contraction of the uterus. We learned that in chapter 1 of the first class that we learned with our when we did our positive feedback loops. Okay. So what do you need to know here? One, you need to know all the hypothalamic or hormones. And you need to know this relationship. So you need to understand the relationship to hypothalamus, pituitary, and then whatever organ it is. If it's the adrenal cortex, if it's the liver, it's the thyroid, it's the ovary, it's the testes, it's the mammary gland. That's all this is. Then you need to know all of the different hypothalamic hormones. Then you need to know the 7 anterior pituitary, and you need to know the 2 posterior pituitary, and you need to know all the functions of those. Then you need to know the hormones that are secreted by the organs and what they do. So what does cortisol do? What does thyroid do? What does testosterone do? What does estrogen do? That takes practice. You got to practice going over that. And then you also need to understand what the infundibulum is and what the hypophyseal portal system is. All right, that's where I'll stop because I think that's the majority of the chapter. Oh, and then you need to know how it's regulated.